opportunity that's been presented to us through our partners over in Albion. And I want to make sure that we know, for points of disclosure, we do have the press represented here, and so Sophia is here from the Battle Creek Enquirer. Is there anyone else from the press here? Okay. I want to introduce and recognize my board members that are here. I've got Richard Lindsay up top. Raise your hand. There you go. Hi. There you go. Bill DeSmet, Lisa Middleton, Chris McComb, and Vic Potter. I don't think. We do have residents from Marshall, and we also have residents from the Albion community. Can those of you from the Albion community please raise your hand, please? There we go. We got a good contingent that came over. Thank you. We do have some board members from the Albion community, and let's see, Nels Christensen. Nels, is there any, who else is here? That's about it? Okay. And we have Dr. Maury Ditzler, the president of Albion College. Thank you, Maury, for coming. Appreciate it. So the format for tonight is I'm going to do a presentation and just kind of walk through and unpack some of the issues relative to annexation and talk a little bit about that. We're going to wrap up also on some new developments that just came forward for some consideration that I want you all to be aware of. And during the process, we want you to think about your questions that you're going to have, and maybe it might be best to wait until we get done with the presentation to ask the questions. And if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone so everybody can hear those questions, that would be great. Marshall Public Schools has been about developing a strong, comprehensive continuum of educational services that's focused on making sure that we have every opportunity possible for kids to come in, no matter what their needs are or what their circumstances are, to find some pathway to success. We have developed preschool, early childhood work through our GSRP program and our Shamrock Center, 3 elementaries in K-5. We've gone to a middle school, 6-8, traditional high school, which is 9-12. We have a non-traditional high school, which is also 9-12. We have an early college now with our partnership with KCC, which is really a 9-13. And we're working very hard with our manufacturing base to also push our students towards job skills certifications and training. And we also have the educational component of the Michigan Youth Challenge Academy, which is located in Battle Creek, and we operate the school setting for them relative to dropouts that are from around the entire state of Michigan who are seeking their education here and hopefully getting completed, either going to the armed services or onto the world of work or education. Annette Kampfel just walked in. Thank you, Annette, for coming. As that introduction, we're here to talk about annexation. Should Marshall Public Schools annex Albion schools? So the annexing district would be considered Marshall Public Schools. And the annexed district will be Albion Public Schools. So annexing district Marshall passes a board resolution. I'm sorry, did I go, I'm sorry, I went too forward. Albion requested on December 7th that the Marshall Board and Marshall Public Schools consider annexing their district. That was done by a 6-1 vote after much discussion and a lot of exploration, taking a lot of public comment, and this was over the course of the last, it feels like a couple months. Marshall Public Schools is currently investigating this possibility through our legal counsel, through counsel with the Department of Treasury. We've had a couple meetings with them, also the Department of Education, and also with seeking input from you guys, internal and external stakeholders, and having a whole lot of conversations across the board, including through social media and face-to-face. In the school code and throughout the process, Albion is considered the annex district and Marshall is considered the annexing district. It probably should be no surprise to you that the Albion Public Schools has been struggling financially for some time. Prior to 2013, they had not been making adequate yearly progress for a number of years, and financially they continued to increase their deficit because they were losing students primarily at the tune of 100 to 120 per year for the last decade, maybe longer. In the process, the first step that they did was make a very difficult and courageous decision to readjust and restructure their school district in becoming just a K-8 district, and focusing on that to make it STEM focused, to make it focused on kids learning early in music and art and those types of things, and to send or request us to enter into a cooperative agreement to provide their high school education for their students. And we did that in 2013 with a whole lot of interest, very little fanfare, but a whole lot of interest. And it was extremely successful, has been extremely successful, and we're now into our third year of operations for that. It brought over 158 students that came into our high school as residents of the Albion School District that had not been in our schools before. And we were able to maintain the majority of those students and successfully either complete or we still have them in our schools. There were a number of students that did leave by choice, because in our school of choice environment, students can choose to go whichever school setting that they want to. But all in all, it's been a successful experience. If you talk to the kids, there are issues that we always will have, and that's because kids are adolescents. But on top of that, our students, with given the opportunity, have demonstrated their interest in being globally minded, focused on equity, and focused on learning, and getting excited about the diversity of thought and action that we have around our schools. And so there are kids that aren't making it, we know that, but there were kids that weren't making it that reside in Marshall to begin with. And we're struggling every day to make sure that we find a way to reach those kids, engage them in the learning environment, and move them forward. So what are the steps to annexation? The annexation district, Marshall Public Schools, has to pass a board resolution to annex another district. That has to be by board decision, board action. Once that gets approved, if that gets approved, the resolution is passed by the majority of the Marshall Board. This resolution is then submitted to the State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the Michigan Department of Ed, and I'm sure the governor takes a look at it. And if that's then approved by the state superintendent, Brian Whiston, and the MDE, they will officially notify both districts that the annexation plan has been approved. The Albion Board then calls an election for the voters in the existing Albion district to approve the annexation, and in the ballot language, the date annexation is to take effect or take place is determined, so that when the voters in Albion are voting in an election to approve annexation, they know when that annexation will occur. That's something that we all agree upon before it goes. After the majority approval of the voters is verified, and on the date of annexation, all assets and all liabilities are transferred to Marshall Public Schools, and the Albion Board releases their authority to Marshall Public Schools. And then finally, the Albion Schools is essentially absorbed into the existing and expanded district of Marshall Public Schools, and we all become one. Almost twice our geographic size, and at least 2/3 more voters in the overall Marshall district. So So I want to make sure that you know the timelines of what's been in place at this point. Marshall Public Schools resolution is going to be heard on December 16th at a board session that begins at 6 p.m. At that point, I'll be able to bring a recommendation of whether I support or I don't support the resolution to move forward with annexation. The Michigan Department of Education will receive, if passed, the resolution for annexing Albion, and they will make their decision. We've heard it could be as fast as one day, or it could be a little bit longer, but we're hoping it's going to happen by December 21st. If that's approved by the Michigan Department of Education, then Albion Board will call their election on or before February 7th of 2016. And that's the deadline for legal ballot language to be submitted to the clerk, county clerk, for it to go on the ballot for the May election. And that's why we have that deadline. Whoops. Okay, so if they submit and call the election, then the May election, 2016, is when the question goes in front of the Albion voters. And if they approve the annexation, then the annexation becomes official whenever we've determined that date. And that could be July 1, 2016, which is the beginning of our school year and fiscal year, or it could be September 1, which is just before the kids return. We're not sure about those dates yet, so when they get determined, we'll let people know if we go down that path that far. There's some financial implications that we need to discuss, and this is what we're currently doing with our due diligence about whether or not this is fiscally responsible, feasible, and appropriate. Albion has a current operational debt, and whatever that operational debt becomes at the time of annexation, the Marshall Public Schools then absorbs that debt and must find their ways to mitigate that debt through the Department of Treasury, through certain grants that are available, and through funding. Right now, that debt is listed at $1.8 million as an operational debt. Albion's financial assets and liabilities become Marshall's at the point of annexation. That includes all of their buildings, and right now they've got 4 that they still own. 2 are mothballed and not in use, and 2 are in use. And as we go through that, obviously, you know the history that we've had if you're here in Marshall about Sherman Elementary, and we chose to raise that and make that into a park. Those decisions are still in front of any district that partners with Albion and also the Albion community. But also other property, equipment, et cetera, all of that operates within the district becomes the property of Marshall Public Schools. Albion's sinking fund of 4 mills that they passed will terminate at the point of annexation. Marshall's sinking fund of 1 mill, because it's got an extra year in its duration, will continue on and spread across all taxpayers in the newly expanded district. Here's an example of a win-win that we take a look at. What that means is the Albion voters have a reduction of their mills for sinking fund from 4 to 1, and the Marshall district has an expansion of revenue generated across approximately 70-some thousand additional voters. So in our view, that could be a good win-win for us, or 7,000 additional voters, I think. Sorry. A sinking fund is a bonded fund that we levy, that you vote on, that allows us to use money for the purposes of facilities upgrades, grounds, and those types of things. And there's a digest about 2.5 inches thick that tells us exactly what we can and can't use those sinking funds for. And we generate that. Our voters have approved that. We generate that, and with that money, we do things like purchasing new equipment and those types of things and making significant changes to our facilities. It cannot be used for general operational money. It can't be used to take care of our personnel costs or any of our consumable costs, et cetera. Law requires us to do it only on certain things. The existing bond indebtedness at the time of annexation that exists in Albion is the Albion voters or the Albion taxpayers' responsibility to repay. As well, the existing bond indebtedness in Marshall that you've all voted on and that we have on our tax bills is our responsibility to pay. We could choose to merge those two in an annexation vote, but we've decided at this point not to. And I believe that will probably be part of, if we want to do that, it would have to be in the resolution. And I don't think we have board support to continue to think about that. We just want to go with what you owe, you pay, what we owe, we pay. And then after annexation, any bond vote that goes to the voters and gets passed, any bond responsibilities becomes the indebtedness of the entire new district, expanded district for Marshall Public Schools. So it would include all the additional taxpayers that we brought into the district. Let's see. Operating revenues. Every district passes 18 mills non-homestead. Those 18 mills are levied on non-homestead property. A lot of that has rental properties and businesses and those kind of things. That money that gets generated from the 18 mills adds to what we generate on a per pupil level on funding from the state to help us operate our district. And if the voting populace does not pass an 18 mills, you've seen it time and time again where we have to go back time and time again to ask the voters to approve it and try to explain why that's necessary. So you can assume that just, I don't know if there's one operating district right now in Michigan that doesn't have an 18 mil. But what happens with that 18 mil is that goes into our operational funds. There's a per pupil foundation allowance. There is some discussion about trying to get some positive variance on that with the state. It doesn't apply in this case because both of our districts are at the lowest foundation allowance that the state issues. Every district except 2 in Calhoun County are that way. We're all at the lowest amount of foundation. I think it's around 73, let's just say 7,300 per pupil. So depending on how many students you get, depends on how much money you generate from the state to run your district, to cover your costs and so forth. And that goes along with what the 18 mills does. There are federal title dollars or funds and state at-risk funds that get generated based on students that are economically disadvantaged, and that's generated by our free and reduced lunch count. It might surprise you to know that tomorrow, as we celebrate our 2015 National Blue Ribbon School at Gordon Elementary for this year, we got chosen for outstanding performance academic achievement over a 5-year period of time, and in the category of economically disadvantaged school because we were carrying 41% free and reduced lunch. So in Marshall, a lot of times that doesn't get out there in the public, and I think you need to know that we have a number of students that are economically disadvantaged in our community and in our schools. And so Albion has the same, not the same numbers, but they have the same issue. They're dealing with economically disadvantaged, and when those two numbers combine, then that generates or helps generate how the title funds are calculated and how the at-risk funds are calculated. Then there's a big line item in the state budget called 22G. The 22G line item budget is for any district annexing or consolidating with another district. They put a nice carrot out there because the state wants to see when we have distressed, financially distressed districts, how can we combine districts to make it work for all? That is a competitive grant, which means that my staff, Becky and I, are going to have to write this grant, make it as competitive as possible, get all the supports we can for this grant, and submit it to the state so that we can be in the competition for those dollars. What that means is we have to project out how much is it going to cost in transition, what are the additional costs of service, what do we plan to maintain, and how do we maintain that through these kind of grant dollars until we can stabilize overall the staffing model and the services we provide. Yeah. The question was, can any of the money in 22G be used towards debt? They didn't say no. They didn't say yes. The Treasury and I have been working together about that, and we have some assurances from, even in Governor Snyder's office, the original writer of that bill's intention was to be able to use that money to reduce debt. But they're concerned about if that gets opened up to that level, how many districts that are just under economically distressed districts are going to go after those dollars and compete for those dollars. So they're looking at what are the requirements to be eligible to be able to write for this grant. And the eligibility has to be, first, that the Albion School District passed a resolution requesting annexation, and second, that Marshall Public Schools passed a resolution to pursue annexation. Once those two things are met, there's some pretty good high-level quality points you receive in your competition for those grants that put you in a good position to be able to receive some of those dollars. And the benefit of that is we actually are able to, only through those resources and only through annexation, will we be able to be in a position to help the Albion community reduce their debt. Because if they do not, if Albion does not annex or get annexed by another district, they are saddled with the debt that's been incurred. And they have to pay that debt down, and most likely, with declining enrollment even further, they're not able to really function independently as an independent school district in the very near future. And so what we want to try to do is explore, why is this a good idea for the betterment of kids that we serve in our region? And then there's local dollars and or resources from grantors and community partners, and through an annexation you expand that wherewithal. I've already been contacted by a number of folks, nonprofits in our region, let's call it that, but if we had annexed, then they would all be inside of our annexed district. I've been contacted by nonprofits, and they've been asking, what can we do? We've been contacted by partners, new partners at the table, and partners that we've been working with, saying, how can we help? And I do believe that people are willing to step up and support something that makes sense, something that's sustainable, and something that's making a difference in the lives of our kids. So some unknowns. We don't know what the enrollment's going to actually look like in Albion at the time of annexation. Right now, they were at 454 in last count. If you guys pay attention to the school of choice situation that we have in the state, the school of choice window is opening in about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. It closes the first Friday of the first week of the second semester. And right now, there are a number of districts that are busing into the Albion School District and picking students up, either at center drops or actually now they're talking about even going door to door. And when they do those types of things, they devastate districts with students that don't have the economic ability to move into a school of choice operation and transport themselves to and from whatever school they choose. So the more districts come into the Albion district to pick kids up, the more kids are eligible for going out in school of choicing. And if that happens to the level that we suspect it's going to in January, Albion could very well lose a number more students. What we have to do, and what Albion needs to do regardless of whether this annexation goes forward or not, is to try to get the message out there to help parents reinvest themselves in the Albion school system so that they at least have a chance to fight. But right now, if they lose another 100 students, that's going to be real devastating for them. And there is going to be a critical mass. We're calculating that right now, but there's going to be a critical mass that we have to look at to say, do we have enough kindergarten through 5th grade to at least offer a community-centered school in Albion through this annexation? Or do we have the ability to do that through partnerships and so forth to make sure that we have a viable, equitable, and I mean equitable between our 3 elementaries and that elementary, to be able to provide a quality education for kids? If we can't do that, we're not interested in it. So we need to make sure that we find a way to balance that. There's an impact of school of choice students entering Marshall Public Schools from across the region. Whether we annex the Albion district or we do not, the circumstances in Albion will have a direct impact on our school system, kindergarten through high school, bar none. And they're going to have the same kind of impact with local districts from around the area. Because school of choice will make those declarations up until the first Friday after the school starts. And what we normally do is we normally have, on average, like 30 or so students school of choicing into the district. And if we have a concentration of kids coming into one particular grade that already has a high class size, we have to make a decision on the fly. How are we going to add another section, which means another teacher that's certified and highly qualified to teach that grade level? And we do that a lot of times literally in a couple weeks while we get subs to come in and cover the classroom until we can fill that with a viable teacher. If that demand increases for Marshall without doing this annexation, we'll be wrestling with that problem. In a way, it's a good problem to have, but in another way, if there's a way we can do it where we're more planful, where we have more time to adjust, where we have a couple weeks at least to figure out what can we do here, how can we identify qualified teachers to bring them in the classroom, that's a lot better for everybody involved. But that school of choice window is going to affect everyone. Increased operational costs for personnel, instruction, transportation, and supplies that is sustainable over time. So we don't have a crystal ball, but we have some actuarials. We take a look at the costs. We know what it costs for a teacher. We know what it costs generally to operate a classroom. We take a look at the numbers that we suspect that we're going to get, and we project those out and figure out how do we add to this picture to accommodate annexation that is going to be sustainable over time. We don't want to build something and provide services and then turn around and have to lay people off every single year. In fact, more to the point, we want to build a robust system that allows us to acknowledge and support the contributions that our teachers and administrators are making to this project. Determining the use of existing facilities still in operation at the time of annexation, and whether we do a liquidation of facilities that aren't in use by way of selling the property or what have you, or even by way of raising the property. That's going to be an Albion conversation on what the Albion community would like to see done. Those are some unknowns. There's a whole lot of other unknowns out there, but that gives you an idea of a little bit of the scope of the conversation we've been having nonstop to try to figure out what is the best decision that we can make as we move forward. So win-wins for annexation. This really truly allows the Marshall Public Schools to expand its operations in a bigger way. It allows us to really do pre-K through 16, grade 16. because for the first time, in our district alone, we would have an institution of higher learning in Albion College, which is a stellar college, high expectations, that can deliver a 4-year degree. We have KCC as our partner, Kellogg Community College, that is working diligently with us on our early college. Would love to see that expanded to offer that kind of opportunity for every high school student that chooses that pathway. And they've been really great partners with us in regards to the economic development that we're trying to foster in here by developing out really good workforce. So we have a great opportunity here. We can do a 2-year associate's degree, a certificate program through partnership for vocational or skilled trades, a 4-year degree in making sure that our kids get tracked in and they get connected with Albion College, and that might be a choice for them to make. Regional efforts in providing quality education services for all students, regardless of their need and their circumstance. New partnerships forged with business, government entities, new nonprofits, and communities that expand opportunities for our students. We started a collaboration conversation with Albion back in 2010, I think so. So we formed a joint committee between Marshall and Albion. And then we brought in another partner in Marlee. And we've been talking about how do we improve the opportunities for our children in this region through our partnerships and working well together. And this is one of those pathways we've talked about. We didn't think it was going to come, but now that it's here, we need to investigate it. And then a Marshall district representing close to 18,000 taxpayers, feasibly serving over 3,000 students, and operating with a 4-year institution of higher learning and a 2-year community college within the district boundaries is quite an asset and quite a vision to have. Because if you can pull all those people together around critical mass and creating more opportunities for kids, that's a great thing. There's also been some conversation about expanding the cooperative agreement. So let me get off annexation for just a second. It's kind of connected to this because the idea is there any way we can mitigate the school of choice situation coming up? Is there any way that we can find a way to transition a little bit more smoothly instead of just all of a sudden starting next year? Albion board wanted us to explore the possibility of bringing over the 6th and 8th graders at the semester break this year. After we all took a deep inhale, and I asked my administration and my staff at the middle school to explore what if. You know, just if that were to occur, what would you need? What kind of staffing would be necessary? What kind of issues can we anticipate? What kind of things can we mitigate between now and the 25th of January to make that happen? And so they did. They did the homework. They made some good recommendations for us to consider. And we are still doing our due diligence with that. My middle school principal went over to Albion just to share all the assets that we have in our middle school, what that scheduling looks like. In fact, that's where he's at tonight, to just give the information out so people understand what we have to offer. Not to make a decision, just simply to say this is what we have to offer.
Hey, for a second.
Yes.
When and how will that decision be made?
I'm going to get to that in just a second. Yep. Marshall Middle School administration and staff have explored the feasibility and what would be needed to pull this off successfully, seamlessly as much as possible with our students and parents, and in a successful manner that limits disruption. And so we're talking through that, we're thinking through that. Obviously, we have to have some conversations with parents from both schools and both communities about what this might look like, and what our ideas are to make sure that students can come into this program without disrupting the current classroom assignments and the current teacher assignments and all that. So to answer your question, To begin with, no decision has been made by either district at this point. The Albion Board would have to first take action to invite Marshall to expand the existing cooperative agreement from its high school operations to include its middle school. And then the Marshall Board would need to take action to accept the expansion as requested. Did I say that no decision was made yet? No decision's been made yet. So all we've done is open the conversation. Yeah.
How are you going to split the state money up
Thank you.
in half a year?
We can actually do that based on school of choice anymore, the climate. You're allowed to actually file for the per pupil foundation allowance for the time you actually have the student in your building. And so what we would be looking at is 50% of an annual per pupil foundation allowance. And we figure if we got about 117 students that came over to our middle school, which would be really around 1/5 of our current population in the middle school, it would generate somewhere in the neighborhood, and don't slay me on my math, but around $430,000 in revenue. That means $430,000 would go away from Albion's revenue. And then it would cost us probably that much to implement. $370,000 is our best shot now, but there's also other costs we didn't incur or we didn't include in that calculation, like transportation increases and those types of things.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to be successful and answer your point directly, the Albion Board would need to take their action requesting expansion of the CA by 12/15 of this year. The Marshall Board would need to take their action of accepting this request by 12/16, which is the same date we have planned to consider the resolution for annexation. Marshall Middle School and Albion Middle School would have around 30 days to make this happen for kids. It's pretty aggressive. We did the Albion High School, which represented 158 kids, and 3 classes that were coming over in less than 2.5 months. But it was a different time. It was summertime. You could get kids together. You could do a lot of processing. I think the stuff we did with the youth symposium was really outstanding, and it helped our young people see each other in the hallways as student leaders. And we still do those symposiums this year, every year since, where we're doing student leader training so that our students come in and they see themselves as student leaders. So to do that now in 30 days for 111 kids, or 117, whatever comes in, and remember, school of choice, so there will be probably a number of students that may choose not to come over for that. But if we were to do that, we need to find ways to get our kids together with other students that reside in Albion that are in our system now, with our students that we currently have at the middle school in any way, shape, or form, and to be able to get parents access to our buildings to be able to see what's going on. So you can tell that's a pretty big undertaking. So in closing with this, we're going to make this presentation available on the website. I want you to please understand that you are invited to keep engaged in this conversation. We introduced our board members who are here. Dr. George Seifert has just come in too. Feel free to reach out to our board members as you've already done. Richard Lindsay is managing our school district Facebook page, and so he's able to take questions that way. You can contact my office anytime. Lately, if you can catch me, it's been a fast and furious period, but we'll get back to you. And if you have any questions, you can talk to our building administrators as well. I'll try to feed as much information to them so you have the facts in front of you. Whatever action we take to more directly partner with Albion, we need to make sure that we're putting the district's financial interest first, that we're making sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk. Because it doesn't help Albion and it doesn't help Marshall if we go into this and find out that we're at financial risk. And I can tell you I've been working with some good people at Treasury and MDE that are giving us very good feelings that we're going to be able to work this out and make it productive. We need to be able to sustain the growth and expansion of our district that occurs through this action if we approve it. And like I said, we don't want to be in a position where we build something too big and have to cut. So we have to be careful and cautious about the additions that we make as we move forward, at the same time giving the students all the supports they need. And then we need to continue to drive our decisions by being student-centered and keeping in mind equity and access for all students. The situation that lies in front of us is we have a neighboring district that is struggling to adequately educate their children. Based on budget reductions, they've cut all of their specials out, all of their phys ed, their art, their music, all the things that could round that district out to make it an attractive school district to attend, and they're trying to hold on. And I think we can do better. That's one of the things that drives me in regards to being student-centered. I also understand my role as superintendent of Marshall Public Schools. So we need to make sure that whatever I bring to the board, they have all the facts in front of them so they can make a decided decision. Let me underscore the fact that the Albion community votes, popular votes on this decision in May. They could vote it down. It might not even get out of the box if our board votes it down. But every step along the way means we have to share information, keep our eyes wide open, and make sure that we're making the right decision. And by the time we get down to the vote, if that's where we're headed, we need to make sure that everyone has the information in hand to make a good decision. And if annexation doesn't occur for whatever reason, they will have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they're going to finish the year and then what they're going to do in their next step. And that's a difficult choice. But that's the situation that's been handed to us. Maury, at this time, because you and I have already been working together, you've done some really great support for our youth symposiums in the summer, the work that we do with your teachers coming in, both here in Marshall and over in Albion. Would you care to make a statement or anything you'd like to share?
You know, I have a number of comments I'd like to share, but we've got some folks here who I'm sure are dying to ask questions. I can stay a while, right? Some of you may have to run home, so why don't we let people ask the questions? I'll stick around, and I can give my comments a little bit later.
Sounds perfect. So, questions, please. Come on up if you don't mind, or I'll shout loud.
I can shout.
All right.
I can be as loud as Mr. Potter here. I've been charged by friends and family who, not to be crass about it, what is this going to cost the average taxpayer? I mean, I really want to help all the Albion kids. I thought getting the high school to get them over here was great. But like in Lee Township, we just got socked with a tax bill of an extra $1,000 per year to cover a ditch. We pay this for 10 years. What is this going to cost us, or have we no idea? You said have to gather more funding. I think funding equals like we're asking the taxpayers to
No.
do a little something.
No, we're not, first off, we're not going back to ask the taxpayers for any additional operating expenses than you already currently give.
Okay.
The only way we're going to go back to the taxpayers for anything additional would be any renewal on a sinking fund that you've already voted for, I think, till 2018. Are we longer than that? Huh? 2020?
We just did a 5-year, I thought.
5-year, yeah. And then the other one would be any kind of building, you know, what we call capital improvement bonds. And at this point, I don't have that in my sights at all at this juncture. So no, we're not going back to the taxpayers and asking for more money. And yes, it could generate more revenue for our existing services. I got to tell you, I asked my staff to write down all of the assets that they have under each of our categories, you know, the elementary, the middle school, the high school, the non-traditional, traditional, early college, all that. I got 7.5 pages of 9-font listings of all the assets that this district has. And I got to tell you, every year it's more and more difficult to maintain those assets because we face declining enrollment from time to time and continually. We face school of choice coming in, but we also face school of choice going out. And if we're going to sustain the kind of quality educational opportunities we provide our kids, we have to find a way to get more students, stable students, into our district that don't just go from one building to, or one school district to another, but find a home in Marshall. That's critical for our survival and critical for your kids to continue to receive the kind of quality stuff we provide.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I gotta agree with the lone dissenting Albion Public School board member who thinks this whole thing is going way too fast. And I'm a little alarmed with what you showed me as far as the high school. That is way too quick a turnaround and way too much of a disruption, I think, to the middle school as it is. I mean, we're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who are hard to handle as it is. Now
Yes.
you throw 110 more kids in there. That's just my initial gut reaction. This is going way too fast. The only thing I can compare it to is, in my head when I first read this, is why would we want, and this is a little crass too, why do we want to acquire a failing company? And that's what it is, it's a failing school district. Why do we want to acquire that company? And I came here, hoping to hear the good reasons. You have win-win. But what, the big thing I could think is the liabilities. We acquire their assets and their liabilities. When will we know what the liabilities are? And what are the negatives of this? I mean, you're blowing a lot of sunshine up here, but what are the negatives that could come from this annexation?
Oh, well, there's always a challenge in any kind of change that you're going to receive this way. There's going to be challenges for annexation. Let's just talk about that for a second, because I know the cooperative agreement has you most concerned. The annexation is something that will come over time. I mean, if they have a vote that they have to make in May, that gives us plenty of time to continue to have conversations and so forth and explore. If it gets voted in, then we set a date ourselves of when that takes place, and that gives us a whole lot of time to plan and work with kids getting engaged. It's a failing system because of the financials and because of the long-term debt that's been incurred in that system.
There's a reason those parents are choosing to take their kids elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to inherit that liability.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
whatever that reason is, we are inheriting that.
Right. And we're able to apply some really, really great things to that opportunity for kids to learn. And so, are there challenges? There are always challenges. And we thought there were going to be a huge amount of challenges at the high school. There have been. Our teachers have worked through those. It hasn't been perfect, never is going to be perfect. We have a problem still to this day trying to figure out a way to engage our parents that reside in Albion into the high school system and making sure that they have unfettered and equitable access to and from their school, because we are their high school now. That's a real challenge for us as a system. And I really believe that we have to have equal access and equal representation. Yes, it is a big problem. The students, though, if the student was really failing in Albion, they're going to probably have some failing moments in Marshall. If a student was succeeding in Albion, they're going to succeed in Marshall. We looked at the stats. We know that our test scores and our ACT scores and so forth had a little bit of a shake, and then they rebounded perfectly. In fact, higher than we have higher gaps between our performance and the state average than we ever had. It's a new assessment, so it's kind of hard to tell over time. But I mean, we have valedictorian, top 10 ACTs with 32, 33, and yes, we have ACTs of 12 and 13. But we had those anyways with students that reside in Marshall. So, I just see it as, let's figure out a way to educate every child and figure out how we can lift them all up. There are some logistical challenges for an annexation. There's some huge challenges for the cooperative agreement. I'll give you that. That's kind of scary thinking about doing that in 30 days. I don't even know if it's possible. And I haven't brought that question to the board, and Albion's board is still wrestling with whether they want to bring the question to a vote. But we are going to do our due diligence because we need to be prepared to say whether we support it or not and why. Appreciate you being here and asking those questions. Back in the back. Okay.
The second question is, why did the people of the district of Albion get to vote on this when the district of Marshall gets no say?
Okay, so let me address, that question there is, it's a state law, and that's, when you do annexation, the School Aid Act demonstrates exactly what the process is, and they've determined that if it's an annexation, the annexed district has to vote on accepting annexation. The annexing district only needs to have the Board of Education make that decision.
I didn't ask that question. I asked, why did the citizens of Marshall get no say in this? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is a community forum. It's certainly by no means a popular vote.
I agree with you, it's not a popular vote. But, I mean, that's the way the state law is set up. If we were consolidating, that would be different.
So within a period of 3 months, we essentially ramrod this thing through the system and basically taxpayers didn't take whatever we give them.
Well, you have an elected board that represents the community, and they are completely open for any comments and questions and so forth coming out of our stakeholders in the community. So am I, and so is everybody else that works in the district. We try to make the best decision we possibly can in the best interest. Yep. So your first question, the positives about this financially, first off, the 1.8 deficit, operating deficit right now, there are avenues in an annexation that allows us to help that go away. Well, such as Treasury allowing cash flow to be used to pay those down, to dismiss some of the debt because it wouldn't be our responsibility to cover. The 22G is a $5 million line item that would allow us to use some of those dollars to pay down the debt.
That wasn't a guarantee, correct?
It's not a guarantee, it's competitive. And we would know that, by the way, before Albion moves the question for an election. And so if we didn't receive a positive thing from the state, the board's already told me that if we don't get that grant, that competitive grant at the level that we're requesting, that's probably going to be a showstopper. So, and then the other thing is, when you do a combined district like this, where you go to about 18,000 instead of 10,000 voters and taxpayers, you spread out the debt that you incur in regards to any future building bonds and so forth. So the millages go down, cost us less to get more, essentially. And you also receive more money from the 18 mills. So for example, in Albion right now, 18 mills non-homestead generates $1.5 million annually into their operational fund. That 1.5 million would then become part of our assets as we go forward after the debt has been released. And I'm not interested in saddling up to a debt that's going to take us years to pay off. So I've talked to Treasury and I've talked to MDA and it said, you got to help us get through this without debt. We need to find a way to be able to get this covered so that we can get it done and move on. And there's a possibility of doing that, but it's going to take us putting that together and then bringing that recommendation back. We can pull our acknowledgement of going forward with the annexation if we don't get the grant, but because we're making these decisions, we qualify to get the grant. And they'll start releasing those dollars to allow us to cover all of our transitional costs right now, the election costs that may be coming up, any additional resources we've been pouring into this and exploring it, and they won't take it back if annexation doesn't go through. The state is invested in seeing these models be considered to its fruition, and so I believe the revenues that could be generated from that could help us through the process. Doesn't put us at risk other than a whole lot of time and gray hair. And if we get to the point where our board approves it, we have an opportunity again to write for that grant. We'll know before they go to submit their ballot language whether or not we received it or not, and if it is a level that we're expecting it to be. And if all of that goes forward, you'll be informed of that. You'll know why we're still going forward with it and supporting annexation, if that's indeed what the board chooses to do on the 16th. As far as funding, we're asking for the whole $5 million. You kidding me? Yeah, no. It's a competitive grant. We do know that there's one district already in the hopper requesting money. We also know that they don't qualify. So we know that there's $5 million in that line item, and we should be pursuing every single dollar we can get from that line item.
Isn't there one situation, I'm sorry to dominate the conversation here, that I think Board President Lindsay put in his article where Marshall could vote on it, if the situation was that we were inheriting their debt? Isn't that the only situation Marshall voters could vote on it?
No, that would be if we merge the two existing bond indebtedness that already exists, if we merge those two.
Consideration is just annexation.
Yeah, it's just annexation. Question back?
So, to the best of your knowledge, we are the only district in the state going for the $5,022,G grant.
As of last Friday, according to Dan Hannaran, yes, that's true. But that's the best of my knowledge at this point. Because I think it's going to be competitive. I think there'll be at least one or two other districts thinking. There's a couple that are in the pipeline on annexation and consolidation right now, but they're not expecting to come to a vote until next year. This is available every single year. And Jeff Hansen is the author of this bill, and he believed that his intent was to have this money available to help us pay down those deficits and liabilities that we're talking about. And if that's the case, then we'll be able to use those dollars a lot more directly. Yes?
What happens if Albion dissolves? Do you get any of the $5 million or just the kids?
If they dissolve, at what point?
At any point, if the school district dissolves, who gets the kids?
Yes, okay, good question.
All right.
So if there's dissolution of a district, what happens then is the question goes to the county ISD superintendent, and that would be Dr. Terrence Lunger right here. Hey. And his board, and they would redraw the district boundary lines within the county to accommodate the students in that district that dissolved. So here's the thing, though. Dissolution, 22G money isn't available for dissolution.
So you would get the kids and not the buck.
You get the kids,
Not at all.
well, you'd actually get the kids and you'd get the liabilities in that particular area that's been given to you as well. So if I happen to have a line drawn that says you now own a new high school over there in the Albion community, that would be my responsibility as a new district line to figure out what we would do with that asset or that liability.
Don't they do it equitably though, where they spread out the students?
They try to,
Not just
yeah, they try to.
a little bit?
Yep, they try to. There's a couple of decisions about that. I haven't read the full law yet, but I can tell you that they try to make the lines appropriate for the population, the number of students and so forth, and the assets and liabilities that go with it. But I wouldn't want to be in his seat figuring that line drawn.
We let them know.
How does it work with part of Albion Schools being in Jackson County?
I'm sorry, what?
How does it work with part of Albion Schools being in Jackson
Jackson.
County? Jackson.
It's ISD lines.
For example, Alva and Bellevue are part of the county, they're part of the ISD boundaries. So that district is in our ISD.
So it's not county line, it's ISD line.
Thank you.
Gentleman behind you.
Just, I thought I heard you say, and I just want to see if I heard you correctly, that our school board would go ahead and vote to, I guess, kind of explore this further, we submit the application in December. We would know before Albion actually had their physical vote whether we got the funds.
Yes.
If we did not get the funds, we would then rescind our offer.
My board has already told me that that's the only way it makes it financially feasible. And we wouldn't want to do something that's not financially feasible.
I just thought that was a pretty key point, and I wanted to be sure.
Yeah, it is key. It really is key. And so the work that we do up front on that grant request and the conversations we have with MDE and with Treasury are really critical at this point. I've had a couple of them, like 3 in 1 week, so we're really pushing hard on that. We have our legislators involved. You know, they're taking a look at this from the legislative perspective, and they're all saying, how can we help? And at least explore and make a decision. Pardon me? Yeah, amen. Amen to that. Any other questions? Over here?
Yeah, I've got, but my first one is. The microphone, I can't hear you. Okay, thank you.
Of the current school of choice students at Albion, what percentage or how many choose Marshall as their school of choice as opposed to another district? Are we desirable to the people of Albion?
Yeah, we have, I'm trying to think of that figure. I have a report that I generated that talked about how many students we currently have in our district. We currently have, am I going to misquote here, close to 500 students?
Counting high school.
Yeah, counting high school. So we have a number of students that are already school of choicing into Marshall that are grades K through 5, K through 8.
Okay, so they want to be here. If they were given the choice, they're not going to be choosing a different district.
Yeah, you got to
that
remember
absorb
that Albion has a number of districts driving in with their buses to take school of choice
Right.
kids out. So those kids that remain here want to be here.
Good, okay.
Or they select themselves out through school of choice, or we select them out because of other issues.
Okay, and then to follow up on that, when a student chooses Marshall for school of choice, we get state funds in the amount of $7,300 or whatever per student. But the benefit of annexing the whole district, would we be also getting the property tax dollars from all the residents in Albion to help both the new expanded district, right? You wouldn't just be getting that $7,300 per student.
Right, but let's just define that a little clearer,
Okay,
that
yeah,
it's
'cause
the
I'm
18
unclear.
mil non-homestead tax that we would receive and any new bonded indebtedness that would go on after an annexation. We would have the strength of the entire, what did I say, 18,000 voters.
Right, okay. And a second question, if it's okay. How does this change the day-to-day commute for Marshall students and Albion students? Are Marshall students going over to Albion Middle School, or
No.
are they still kind of doing their own thing day-to-day?
Yeah, it doesn't affect our students in regard, students that reside in the Marshall area continually get transported the way they currently are.
Okay,
Students that reside in the Albion area are currently being transported grades 9 through 12.
right,
And in Marshall, we transport kids grades 6 through 12. So if we were to do the Albion situation with the middle school, they would then be transported on the same bus we transport the 9 through 12 graders.
okay. So will class sizes in Marshall expand as we pull those students in, or are they going to keep them at a reasonable
We're
level?
working, that's why we have to
Okay.
add teachers. You work on trying to maintain what you currently have. I got to tell you, 8th grade, on the average on 8th grade, we have 30 students in a class. We don't necessarily want to go to 33. So the question is, how do we add staff to be able to keep those class sizes down to a reasonable level? Back right here. Young lady?
I would like just an expansion of that in the elementary level. I feel that the class sizes are already very large, and you're looking at an additional 500 students.
Yes, but
So how is this going to affect my children on a day-to-day basis?
we don't have the room in our 3 elementaries to take these students. We know that. So there's 2 things. One is there's a practical aspect of your question. We can't move those kids over here in grades K through 5. Secondly, I don't like the idea of transporting kindergartners for an hour and 20-minute bus ride. Plus, I don't like the idea of having our little binkies leaving our communities to go to a distant school. So you've got that on both sides. Then in a philosophical standpoint, I believe that for Albion to remain viable, they need to have a community-centered school located in their school district. And so that would mean I would try to figure out how to create in a very creative way and also with partnership, a viable, strong, well-performing K-5 school building in Albion. And would we bus kids over that way to go to that school? I would hope that we would build such a wonderful school, equal to the other 3 schools we have in Marshall, that parents that work over there may choose to have their kids educated there. But it's all within our district, so it's not losing kids, it's actually building capacity across the whole entire district, if we were annexing. Back in the back.
On that note, would you be transferring teachers from our 3 elementaries over to theirs?
Not unless they voluntarily wanted to do that. We're not reassigning teachers. We are going to be looking at the teachers, if we annex, we would be looking at the teachers that exist in Albion. We would go through our normal interview process that we do, and we find the best certified, highly qualified teachers we can put in those situations. That may be some of those teachers, it may not. It just depends on how that process goes. There was a question over here? Yes, I'm
Randy,
sorry.
you touched on a couple of these things and already answered those. One, it was mentioned in, I believe, the newspaper articles that have been very helpful to me just in the last 2 or 3 days. There's a cash flow loan that Albion has in place now, I thought.
Yes.
1.8 or?
2.5.
Okay. What happens with that if this all takes place?
The 2.5 is all schools, most schools that are in the lowest foundation allowance level, which is most of us in Calhoun County. We take a school aid loan. Sometimes we do it through the state and through Treasury. Sometimes we do it independently to a bank that has better rates. Albion has taken a $2.5 million loan, and normally what they do is you pay that back in the summer months when the release of the foundation allowance comes to your school to make up for that 2.5. If an annexation took place, that note's not due until August. So if the annexation took place in July, that would be our responsibility to pay back. But I've got assurances from the state and Treasury that that can be accomplished through grant dollars if we wrote it in.
Second question touched on a little bit, but bus fleet. Does Albion have a bus fleet now? I know they've been losing students in
No.
enrollment.
They don't. They gave up, I think in 2007, 2008, their previous superintendent gave up their bus fleet and subcontracted with Dean Transportation to provide their transportation. So when you do that, you then can lease back those buses from them if you want them back. But in our view, the best thing, if we're going to add to transportation, we're going to look at how can we roll in the purchasing of buses through the 22G fund. And it wouldn't be a lot. You know that we're already running, and we're not running full buses that go to and from, but we're running buses. And so it just depends on the economy of scale, how many students are coming over by bus, et cetera.
My last question is dealing with staffing and potential layoffs. You say if teachers are needed here, if we bring 6, 7, 8 over, I'm assuming you're going to need teachers. Is there adequate space in our middle school?
Absolutely.
But you don't have the staff, you're going to have to add staff.
Yes.
Do any of the Albion teachers and their seniority come along with that and intermingle with Marshall's?
Yeah, it's not the way it used to be. So there's no requirement for us to bring teachers over. There's an interest because we explore the teachers and their interest rate or their interest in coming over, their skill sets and those kind of things through the interview process. There's a good pool of teachers over there that we could actually engage with. But we're not required to bring them over, and then we would have to bring them in at what we customarily do when we bring somebody in that's got 10, 12 years of experience. We have to look at that and what our budget currently occurs. Our union contract limits our ability on how many steps we can give a teacher coming across. And so we just kind of work through that with the union reps and the UniServe director here with the MEA. Good questions. Any other questions at all? Yes, Trace?
How far ahead are you looking financially? I mean, what if this
Right.
When we start not being able to operate based on our notes and stuff, what could happen? I mean, would we? Is there-
Okay, so I've been a superintendent for 13 years now, and every year I've cut budget. So I'm not expecting this to go away, to have that experience completely different next year. I am expecting, though, when we did the high school and we did the Michigan Youth Challenge Academy in 2013, we asked our teachers and our administrators and all of my staff and myself to take a complete freeze and not to add anything for a year until the dust settled. And after the dust settled, we added something back in. Not huge, nothing to write home about, but in this day and age, it was something. Because we wanted to honor and recognize the hard work everybody had done. And then we took a look at how our fund balance goes up and down. We need to try to maintain a 5% fund balance as a restricted fund balance that we don't dig into. So we're doing everything we can to build that back up because the new law requires us to do that, or else we get financial oversight. I can tell you that we're accustomed to budget reductions to some level, one form or another, every single year. My expectation is we carry ourselves through for the next 3 to 5 years. You're able to draw down this 22G money for 3 years. You can actually go back and reapply for 22G if you have good cause and reason. So we're going to leverage everything we possibly can to make that work. But I'd say 3 to 5 years before you see it settle and you know whether or not your decisions are fundamentally going to be sustainable with the system you currently have. And of course, everything we're building is building for growth. Yes?
I see that the principal's here now. Can you have him address a little bit about what he discussed with them today? Can you give a little more transparency?
Yeah. Dave, come on.
All right, here you go. Sorry, Mr. Turner.
No. So just as a backdrop, I asked Dave to respond to Albion's request to give them information. And that's pretty much what he did, is to go over and meet with parents, get a feel for whether or not they're even interested in pursuing this conversation. And I'm going to let Dave go with whatever he cares to share. Get over here.
Been talking all day. Hi, Dave Turner, middle school principal. Thanks for putting me on the spot, really. All right, so here's the crux of the issue, at least in the terms of the middle school and what's happening with what can happen with enrollment. And Randy talked a little bit about this with 8th grade. We have 30 students in a classroom, in some cases 31, depending on the hour, 6 teachers. I know regardless of what we do, whether we decide, whether it's annexation or collaborative agreement, extending that to the middle school, or we don't decide, there is going to be some change at the middle school because I'll have school of choice in 8th grade at a minimum. I know I'll need to add staff. I know that I will need to reschedule students. There is a school of choice window. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's January 22nd is when, what's that? Oh, you already know that? All right, so my conversation with the parents this evening was to go over that information. I shared with them, it wasn't a marketing pitch, it was just matter of fact, here's what Marshall Middle School offers. And as a community, you can decide what you want to do because I think Marshall Middle School does a great job, but there's other schools that might be better for your son or daughter depending on their specific needs. We have Albion students in our district already. We have Homer, we have Olivet, we have Harper Creek. I mean, there are kids, and we want to educate them as much as we can. And we want to prepare not just our staff, but we want to prepare our students as much as we can and get control over this situation as much as we can because there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I went through all of our elective options for them in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which was not something that they have right now. And correct me, there are some board members here from from Albion. 8th grade right now for them, they have self-contained math or self-contained 8th grade classes the whole day. So students going from classroom to classroom. There was a parent that you mentioned how many kids are choosing to come over here. I can tell you for a fact, we would have more kids choosing Marshall if we were to bus into Marshall. It is a matter of, for them, that they cannot get their kid to the designated shuttle space, which was, I'm sorry, I'm going to share this with you because it drove me nuts. I'm driving by Family Fair tonight to go to the meeting, and there's the Marley bus right in the Family Fair parking lot as people are coming in and out. Just, I'm sorry, completely unsafe. Not Marley, Marshall Academy, excuse me. Sorry, Chad Holt. Yeah, anyway, if we were to go into Albion, we would have more kids choosing. It's, in some cases, it's economic. It's a child care issue. They need their older middle school son or daughter to take care of their elementary age child so that they can come here. So choice is not always choice for some of the students that are over there. So keep that in mind. In a nutshell, I'll just calling it like it is, there were 7 parents that showed up today. I had morning session with 3, and I had an evening session, and I had 4. Various things going on. There's also, I think, their city council's meeting. There's also some other play practice or something happened. There are other events going on in the evening. I have an opportunity to talk to the parents on Wednesday with an open house. I'll share a little bit more of that information with them at 7 o'clock in our middle school auditorium, and also the students are coming over during the day on Wednesday. The sentiment from at least those 7 parents is they like the opportunity of the cooperative agreement for the options and opportunity, the music opportunities, the elective choices, the ability, and the kids that were there were like, oh boy, I'd just love to be able to switch classes, because there's it with the same kids all day long, and they're not able to move from place to place. We have the capability, we have the staff. If you would talk with our staff, I mean, we know that change is going to come. We're not sure what the change is going to be, but if we have the ability to take time well in advance to educate, to collaborate, to share, we'll adjust and we'll be able to deal with that. Whereas if we wait until January 22nd and people can even register that Friday, the 26th, we're going to be scrambling to get the necessary and adequate materials, and everybody's going to suffer.
I'm going to express my concern to you.
Yeah.
It seems like it's moving at warp speed.
Mhm.
It's moving way too fast, in my opinion. You're going to ram, what's the enrollment of the school right now?
505.
You're going to increase the capacity by 20%,
Mhm.
and all those different kids with all the different personalities shove them in the school and hope everything works okay? That's a fairy tale. It's not going to happen. It's way too fast.
Well, let's say I get 60 kids, January, and that's not just, I'm not just saying
School
Albion.
choice, 60 kids would come to school choice?
I'm saying it's entirely possible. And then you want to talk about being stressed and rammed and holy cow, what are we going to do?
You get that semester. 60
I'm saying it is entirely possible that kids could come over because of
Has it
things
ever
that.
happened in your time
Oh,
there?
no, but we're in a completely different environment, a different situation. Albion's in a completely different setting than they were before. So there are no guarantees. I just know that I can better prepare and put things in place, treat that first week of school like in second semester, plan for it like it is the first week of school, like we did this year. Get to know those kids, even before the school year starts, but get to know them, build connections, provide them with an opportunity to make connections with the students, and even parents, because I haven't had a chance to even to talk to my middle school parents yet. I know, but I'm trying to find a time to, it could be next Monday night, since we don't have a board meeting next Monday night, where we can talk about these things. Look, anxiety is high any way you slice it and dice it. It's a matter of, do you want to just wait and see? And you're right, maybe nothing happens. Maybe we don't increase our enrollment, and then we don't have that concern. Maybe something does. whether it's 30 in 8th grade. In 8th grade, kids, yeah, I'll be honest, some kids will be upset. Some kids will be happy because then they don't have to be next in that same class with the kid that they didn't like. The issue is, I don't know. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I would rather know and plan for it and be able to address it and tackle it with ample time and be better prepared for whatever uneasiness may happen versus scrambling, because honestly, it takes me 5 weeks to redo a schedule. And if I were to redo the schedule January 26th, I'm halfway through quarter 3. And that isn't good quality education. I mean, we'll do the best we can, don't get me wrong. But if I have January or winter break to work on this, I can provide a better quality education than I can if I'm just scrambling. So I appreciate and understand, my kid's in the middle school too, 7th grade. It's going to affect him. But it also does create a ton of opportunity, financial, staffing, collaboratively. I think the opportunities, this is Dave Turner, parent, community member, and administrator all wrapped in one. I think the opportunities it provides us outweigh just waiting and seeing what's going to happen. That's just, and I understand and appreciate people with different point of views because you haven't had time to really work through all of this yet, and I completely understand that. So, question, yes, sir.
Do you have to take those children to school of choice?
Yeah, there's only 2 ways that I cannot take a student as far as school of choice. Is if they falsify their application process, which I've done, I've been in the business, there's only been 1 kid that's ever done that, 1 family, or there's a criminal, like some kind of a felony or criminal offense. Yeah, so, but even then, let's say a student is suspended, that isn't cause for me to not take a student. I would call the school and find out maybe they got into a fight one time at the beginning of the school year, depending on the situations. That's not a reason for me not to accept the kid.
You can't accommodate them? That doesn't matter?
Sure doesn't, nope. So that's the other piece of this issue of, I'm at 30 in a room, which is less than ideal, but I did that because of budgetary reasons district-wide. I would love to have had 7 teachers in 8th grade so I could get the classes to 26, but as far as a district budget, we needed to be balanced. So, yeah, they show up on that Friday. I got to take them. And how many will that be? I don't know. And honestly, there's no guarantee that if we do enter a collaborative agreement, that all 118 or 120, whatever the number is at the middle school, would show up. We might increase. I do know of the 7 parents that I talked to, they all had either cousins or friends that were going to Marshall Academy that would choose to come here. So they're not even part of the 120 or 118 that would choose to come here if we offered transportation. So beyond the scope of this 118, Marshall Academy there are people that would love to be able to choose somewhere else. Sorry, Randy. Yeah.
I'm assuming our ESD has staff providing special needs students with their instruction at Albion, and if those students are moving, our ESD staff will work to accommodate that.
Yeah, which is another piece of the puzzle when I do schedule at the middle school, the first thing I start with is special education because I have to decide whether they need resource room, which means self-contained, or they're in the mainstream gen ed, and depending on whatever students they have, then I can schedule that way. And if I have to wait until January 26th, it can be done. Don't get me wrong, and we will be successful, but it's easier to plan in advance.
Before we lose too many more people, I'd be very interested in hearing what Dr. Fitzgerald has to say.
Sure. And we're right on time. It's 25 after. This was slated for 7 to 8:30. Mari, do you want to take a moment?
I don't have any answers. I wish I did. I have a thanks and a promise. First, a thanks to the school board at Marshall and the
folks of the Marshall Public School District. Thanks for helping us with high school education. We needed it 3 years ago. We asked for your help, and you provided it. It was a good thing for our students, so I appreciate that. And now we're in a difficult time with K through 8. We ask you again. We ask you because you've been a good partner before. We ask you because you said you'd listen to us. You haven't said what you'd do, but you listened to us. We haven't asked anyone else because no one came with a reasonable proposal other than Marshall. Right? And you came, you said you'd work with us, so we thank you for that. Right? We know you care for children, you care for your children, you care for ours. That's why we want to work with you. I think we can do good things together. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for your work in the past, and thank you for considering what we might do, right? Our citizens haven't voted to do this, and you haven't agreed to do that, but at least you're thinking about it. And the other thing is a promise. You know, it's hard to hear people say that you're like a business that failed. I mean, that's hard to hear. You know, people in Albion worked a long time to have a good school system. And they worked against really difficult odds. It's not because they weren't good teachers, and it's not because they weren't good parents and good school board members, but you know, the things going on in America that have been going on for 200 years that made it difficult for the Albion public school systems. And there are things that happened 50 years ago in terms of our economy and our country. The industrial world changed to a post-industrial world. We were an industrial city, and we didn't make the transition as quickly as we should. So it was tough on our tax base. And then people came up with the idea of school of choice, and it's probably a good idea and it's probably a bad idea at the same time, but it's the law we have. And as a result, we lost students who would have brought tax dollars to our school system. So we didn't have the wealth to drive a tax base. We lost a lot of our students, and a lot of other things were going on in America, and so we got to a difficult position. And so whether it's because we're a failed company, or whether it's because things didn't line up right for us, we need to ask for help again. And it's hard to ask for help. It's as hard to ask for help as it is to provide it. So we thank you for providing help, and I thank our school board for doing the really difficult task of saying we need to turn to someone from help. The easiest thing would have been to say, let's just try it another 6 months. Let's try it another. But you know, it can't go on for 6 months. Our young people aren't getting a good education. And I know it's rushing things through, but those children are only growing up, excuse me. Those children are only growing up once, you know, and we need to educate them. And we need to do it now. So it took a lot of courage in our school board to vote 6-1, and I'm not surprised they voted for you folks, to ask you folks first, because you've been good partners with us. What I can promise you from Albion College is that Albion College has made a commitment. We're in the process of making this commitment. We're making a commitment that we want to be one of America's exemplary colleges in a series of important areas. And one of those areas in which we want to be exemplary, we want to be the place that people say, you know, if you want to know how a college can impact a community and change it for the best, go see what's happening at Albion College, and go see what's happening in Albion. Our commitment is to put all of our intellectual horsepower, high priority, on making ours a sustainable community. A sustainable community is one that has jobs for everyone, health care for the elderly, and education for its children. So we are absolutely committed to putting all of our resources, all of our thoughts, all the good work of our faculty and staff, the commitment of our trustees, and the work of the president to making certain that Albion College is located in a district that has a top-notch, first-rate public school educational system. And we're going to do that regardless of what that district looks like. If there is some way that our district could only include the town of Albion, we're going to put our full resources into making that work. It doesn't seem like that's possible. If that district includes Marshall, you are our community. And our attempt will be to make certain that the community that encompasses us, Marshall and Albion, has the best education possible for their young people. I can't tell you exactly how that's going to happen. I wish we'd started work on it 10 years ago. I wish we'd started working on it 20 years ago. We didn't. We're starting to work on it right now And we're going to do our very best, and that's all I can promise. I can't tell you what it'll look like. We'll do our very best to make certain that anyone that's working with us in our school system will get our very best effort. Thank you for your considerations.
President, being one of the oldest colleges in the state of Michigan, and member of the community development.
Could you use them, please? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Albion College has been a member of the community for 100 years,
Or more.
just about. I'm very aware, because I'm 82 years old myself, so I know Albion very well. Why hasn't Albion helped the Albion schools all of these years? You're telling us now what you want to do. You know, there's a lot of good politicians out there saying what they want to do, but they do not come across. I hear it all the time. Do you have an answer for that? Why hasn't Albion College helped the Albion school system?
You know, I'm sure there have been people that have committed at Albion College, and they've been committed over the times. Clearly, we haven't been as effective as we should be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be at the position we are. So I came up and said, I have no answers. I have only thanks and a promise. I can't say what happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. All I can say is I know that our community is committed to doing our very best. And all I can say is that I will do my very best to make certain that commitment bears fruit for Albion and Marshall.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davis, I have a question for you, sir.
Sure.
What I've seen on the board in your discussion today, it's mass confusion for me. Of course, I'm an older man, but it's mass confusion. The timelines that you're working on, saying that the board has to do something within the next month, or we can't do it. When I was at the Albion meeting last week with the state treasurer there, he was giving some examples when one of the Albion board members asked, are we on any timeline? And his answer to that board member was, no. It's all up to you. He says, can you give me some examples? I said, well, the example I think of is in Detroit, and we worked with them 10 years before they closed their school system because of that situation. But they gave them every opportunity available to work these things out. And so whenever we look at a school system, it's like a corporation or anything of that nature. And when you see a school system fail, it isn't the people in there, it's the people that they have that's running management, and they have not done the proper job. But what I'm really wanting to stress here, everything that I hear in the paper and reading your articles in the paper, it's all about annexation. We haven't talked at all about school of choice. Now, what we're really talking about, the difference between the two things, right now, Albion has 5 schools that they're sharing their students with. And the reason that they go to these schools is not maybe that you don't have the proper program in Albion, but it means that we live closer to Springport or Homer or Parma or Olivet and so forth, so you're going to be missing these things. And so when we're talking about the numbers that we're going to get, that is some of the mass confusion that we have of saying we're going to be getting this amount of students, and like the principal was mentioning, he has no idea what he's going to get. But in turn, if you have school of choice, the people will go and take their children to the school that meets their particular needs, and as we know, all of those things change. But you know, my main consideration here is the city of Albion. I was a banker here for 25 years, and I've been in the real estate business for 32 years. The people of Albion are great people, and I've worked with, I have people here, if I've not worked with them, I've worked with their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. And I know the city of Albion and the people of Albion very well. And so the word here is autonomy. And the president of Albion College should be very concerned about autonomy, because if they do not have a school system in Albion, we've been very gracious of taking on the students that they have that send here, and we welcome all of those, but it's school of choice. We have control over that. You can put it another way, as one of your board members mentioned to be, we want the income, but we don't want the bones. And so let's look at it that way very well. If you were being a banker, let's look at that, and I think the school board has to look at this situation that way. If you were a banker, would you be looking at a corporation that has literally no assets? It has like $4.3 million worth of operational debt. It has 4 buildings that has no value. It's going to cost a lot of money to remove those. We've made mistakes like that too in the past, where that we removed buildings in which we really needed them at a later time. And as we see our population today, what we run into seems like everyone I see on the streets has 1 or 2 children. So we're going to be looking at a population student boom here in the near future. And so looking at a situation like that, I guess I have to think in my, not personally to you, but I have to look at it as my board, and I know what they go through. Because I was a member of the Board of Education for 12 years, and I was the chairman of the board for 4 years. Everything was fine. We have a very fine school system here now, and I know why Albion wants to become a part of it, and we want to invite you to become part of it. But the thing is, we're not interested in picking up your debt that you have and all the miscellaneous problems that you have over there, which I wouldn't think you would even consider as superintendent of our school board of leading us down this alley. And I think what the situation is here, one of our people back here asked, because Albion has the opportunity to vote on it, but the people in Marshall does not have the opportunity to vote on it, and we're looking at 6 or 8 school board members, and I know each one of them, maybe 1 or 2, I don't know, very well, but they do not have any financial capacity. And so they're making decisions on something that is all conditions. And so it's very necessary to wash out all of these question marks and considerations. What if this happened? What if this happened? When I was a banker, I was involved in so many corporations in Albion, et cetera. You go and sit down at the board meeting and you listen to these people and you look at the situation and you know there's no hope. So what do? It's unfortunate to say, but if they're in strict financial position, you adjust your situation for that. And it's, we have to be very concerned. I'm so concerned about the people in the city of Marshall. Being in the real estate business, I know the Albion market, all the market of Calhoun County. Where we're going to be short on income from Albion to help support us. It's going to be future indebtedness onto the local people for additional taxes. We bring unknown number of people into our area. It's going to mean another addition onto our various facilities, and that's going to be spread basically here because of the valuation in Albion is 1/3 or half the value of our properties. And so what happens, it's a lose-lose situation for Marshall annexing this school system to the city of Marshall. I love all you people from Albion, but in turn, don't get caught in this situation of annexation because you're going to completely lose your autonomy, and your city over there is going to be more vacant stores. You won't have any stores, you won't have any banks. Banks are closing in these various areas because of the financial situation there.
Jerry,
So hang on to what you're doing and don't let Marshall take it away.
thank you, Jerry. The one thing I want to close with is, again, the invitation is in front of you. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. You can ask questions on our Facebook page that Richard manages for the board and for the school district. And we'll try, I know he's really diligent in getting back. We'll try to get as much information as you need and as much information as we have. We've been trying to be as absolutely transparent as we possibly can. So I invite you, thank you very much for coming. We have another session like this on Wednesday to take some, and we've been taking, my executive assistant, Kimberly Van Warmer, has been taking copious notes. We've been videotaping this so that we know that the concerns that were coming up, and we'll be exploring those with the board. So again, thank you so much for coming in tonight, and look forward to seeing you again.